laureates and the conditions which have molded them and how they have responded to these conditions. So we start with Maria Ressa. Maria Ressa, her official name in Tagalog. Tagalog is one of the main languages of Philippines. Maria Angelita Ressa, though popularly known as Maria Ressa, she was born in October 2, 1963. And after this, they had some family dislocation in which her father died, and then her mother went to America. And at the age of 10, she also went to America in 1973 and started studying there. And she's a co-founder and CEO of Rappler and the first Filipino Nobel Prize laureate. So you have a first Filipino Nobel Prize laureate and then a Nobel laureate, and that Nobel laureate has become controversial. So even after winning the Nobel Prize, the controversy refuses to die down. This is particularly the fact with Nobel Peace Prizes. So Nobel Peace Prize, even if the award of the prize, the selection of the panel, and even after the award, controversy refuses to die down. And this is there in the case of both these Nobel laureates. So Maria was born in the Philippines, but grew up in the United States after her family migrated to Toms River, New Jersey in 1973, that is at the age of 10. Then after studying in high school in the United States, she joined Princeton University for a pre-medical education. But then after specializing in science, she took a BA degree in English and then certificates in theater and dance. Then in 1986, she finished the degree and then returned to Manila on a Fulbright fellowship. Here she was actually fluent with both these cultures, having stayed in Philippines till the age of 10 and knew Tagalog very well, which is also her mother tongue, and also the background of Philippines, which is a multi-ethnic country like Russia, where Dmitry Muratov is also based in. So after returning to Philippines, she also taught in the university in Philippines. There, her skills in English also helped her to communicate and build a network of students and also many other associates. And later what happens is that she started working in the government station, which was a newly liberated television station. The name of the TV channel was People's Television 4, as a director of newscasts and then head of its specials projects team. Now, what Maria Ressa did was very different from the other journalists and co-workers along with her. This is clearly explained in her dedication of the Peace Prize after she received it. She has dedicated this to all the journalists and says that in her own words, this is really for all the journalists around the world. So unlike many other journalists who were there, saw to it that there was an end to only reporting, Maria Ressa went a step further ahead and started researching and doubled up both as an author, that is as an academic, and also as a journalist. In this, she combined both these things. And here, Ressa was later included in the Time magazine's Person of the Year Award for 2018 as one of the collection of journalists around the world, from around the world, for combating fake news. Because this was the year 2018, we see that the whole world, the fake news was one of the most important items which was searched in the web. And it was very difficult to distinguish between fake news and real news. You had a lot of fake news factories in Croatia and the Balkans, where people would hire someone to actually troll, and then the same thing also of Southeast Asia was laid bare by Maria Ressa. We were taking the newsroom inside the world. Then afterwards, she was working as a Southeast Asia correspondent and has more than 35 years of experience. Maria Ressa then founded Rappler. Now, Rappler is, unlike your other newspapers, it is the only digital media news site. It doesn't have any print publications. It's a total digital media website. And therefore, from the start, Rappler had to actually succumb to a lot of threats. But then Rappler did not succumb. It actually showed that it was more stronger, because the battles in the cyber world are also invisible. Like, for example, you have data denial, DDoS, or denial of service. Then also you have many people going to your website, then what will happen is that the website will crash. And who are these people going to watch the news in Rappler website? These are not people who are interested in news. These are actually people who are paid by the government and some other agencies to actually go and just gate crash into Rappler's website. So you have pockets, you have denial of service through some internet protocol manipulation. And so there are also many technical things. In addition to these technical difficulties, she was also sued for cyber libel. One of the problems which she has been highlighting is that while the laws of the press, that is against newspapers and freedom of speech, are dependent on the press, and most of these are derived from the British laws and also the colonial laws. And Philippines was also colonized first by Spain, and then later we also have the Japanese colonization during World War II. So these colonized countries of Asia took many laws from their colonial masters. But what happens is that this new era of digitality does not have any debate on the laws. So each country has actually planted or instituted newer laws which are more strict than the earlier laws. So with regard to print media, at least there is some consensus on what is a fake story, and print media, there is some evidence and there is some public outcry. But with regard to digital media, what is happening is that it's a new area in which what sometimes Maria Ressa calls this as a battle in a new wild west. Okay. So therefore, she was accused of publishing false news stories, and one of these was concerning a businessman, Wilfred Okeng, and everyone in Philippines knew that this businessman was connected to the Duterte regime, and the Duterte regime is an authoritarian government in Philippines. Philippines, as we all know, has many problems. One of the main problems in Philippines is the problem of drug trafficking and drug consumption. So the successive governments could not stop this drug mafia in Philippines, and it has spread to all parts of the country, that is to most parts of the 13,000 islands. In addition, we also had some militant movements in the islands of Mindanao in southern Philippines asking for autonomy, and some groups asking for outright secession. So therefore, what the government did is that it responded with strong arm tactics. So this strong arm tactics by the Duterte regime was supported by large sections of the public in the name of restoring order. And similarly, the Duterte regime also tried to create a consensus by involving many civil society leaders like the Catholic Church and also some sections for the academicians and a large section of the public to be swayed by using Facebook. This is where Maria Ressa now started focusing more on becoming the representative of the voice of the people in their fight against the Duterte regime. Now, her experience in research in Southeast Asia has led her to publish 3 books. The first book is The Seeds of Terror. This is an eyewitness account of Al-Qaeda's new center of operations in Southeast Asia. And this was written by Maria Ressa, and this was commented by the famous journalist Elizabeth Rubin. So Elizabeth Rubin and Maria Ressa, both of their works mirror the rise of the new militant groups in Southeast Asia and how these militant groups have morphed into what we call the system of narco-terrorism and also terrorism. So they have blended narco-terrorism, they have blended terrorism, and suddenly you have a new type of violence, which is what is called network warfare, from networks to net wars. This actually led her to go further, and then her second work was on Bin Laden to Facebook, from Bin Laden to Facebook. And now this second work, unlike many other works in this area, many works in this area actually taken from like Maya Ranganathan's work on LTT and the use of cyber media, or many other works like the work of the RAND Institute, talk about how new terrorist networks are using the media, social media. What is different in Maria Ressa's work is that she says that when these new networks are there, of course they're using social media, but social media also is to blame. Social media is also to blame in the sense that social media profits from fake news. Social media profits from spreading rumors. And the biggest representative of social media is Facebook, the domineering face of social media. So this led her to tweet some of the important ideas which she felt against these activities of the big media. And one of them is, she says that what happens on social media doesn't stay on social media. That means what happens on social media spills over to the street. Now, online violence leads to real world violence. So this online violence leads to real world violence. So the whole idea that violence means only physical attacks is no longer something which Maria Ressa can digest, and which many people also could not digest but could not articulate well. So she has brought out this articulation. How did she articulate this? She articulates this by saying that this whole idea of online violence is based on certain facts which actually are not facts. They are actually fiction. These are actually ideas, or these are actually data which are not real. But these fictitious data lead people to a state of emotional upheaval, and then this leads to provocation, and then this leads to violence. So this false data or fictitious data, therefore, is what she calls fake news. And so this fake news, when it is on Facebook, which has become the largest purveyor of fake news, is actually dangerous not only for the media and the society or Philippines, but for the whole world. So she says that since 2016, I felt like Sisyphus and Cassandra combined, repeatedly warning that a dystopian present is your future. Means she's talking about the two characters in ancient Greek mythology, Cassandra, who always had this capacity to know what would happen in the future. Cassandra could prophesize the future, but no one would believe. And similarly, Sisyphus would go on to do anything impossible. And finally, when Sisyphus reached the end, the king Sisyphus had taken a giant rock uphill, and finally, when he reached the end, the rock would fall down. So he had to do it again and again. So she says that again and again, warning you that the present in which we are living is no utopia. It is a dystopia. And in Philippines, this dystopia is presided over by Rodrigo Duterte and his group of armed henchmen. So the lines between the judiciary and the executive are blurred. So there is a right to kill everyone. And this right is coming from the state unchallenged. How has it gone unchallenged? Because a consensus is raised for this right. And now she quotes American biologist E.O. Wilson in her book, who said it best: we are facing Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. Paleolithic emotions means emotions of flight and fright, and medieval institutions that rest on crude power and raw power, and not on sophisticated ideas of interaction or empathy. And godlike technology, this is the representative of modernity, a very perverse representation of modernity. Social media, with its highly profitable microblog targeting, she writes, has become a behavior modification system, and where Pavlov's dogs experimented on in real time with disastrous consequences. That means that the whole idea of media is actually becoming a job of a mind manager. So the idea of Facebook in particular she has targeted is actually to brainwash people. Facebook is the world's largest distributor of news, and yet studies have shown that lies laced with anger and hate spread faster and further than really boring facts. So throughout the world, we have seen that when there are conflicts at the local level or conflicts between different regions or between nations, etc., the Facebook and other internet services are banned, because these have actually become some purveyors of fake news. And this is what distinguishes Maria Ressa's work of what we call scholarship, which is not one-sided, but actually taking on both these larger enemies. One is the terrorism, which is homegrown, and also the other terrorism, which has come from the beyond the borders, transnational terrorism, and the other is the big media. So her third book is How to Stand Up to a Dictator. She's writing a third book, and this book is due for publication in 2022. Now, press freedom is under threat in the Philippines. So press freedom is under threat in the Philippines, and we all know about how Maria Ressa is Philippines using her website rappler.com. But on and off, there have been at least 10 major attacks on her. Attacks means not physical attacks, but legal attacks. That is, the legal system was so skewed in favor of the state and in favor of the state, in which people could not appeal. So what she had to do was give surety or ensure that someone stands bail for her. So this constant threat of arrest means you're no longer a free citizen. You're always on the edge. So when you're always on the edge, what happens is that this is one of the important tactics to break you. Now, the government has gone unchallenged because Rodrigo Duterte has come after many corrupt rulers in Philippines. Since people were having a long line of rulers who were corrupt and incompetent, what happened was that violence was unleashed on the street by many of these drug gangs, and then you also had militants in different parts of Philippines. In addition, we also have on one side the expectations of the people rising. What are the expectations of the people? So for Maria Ressa, expectations of the people are that on one side you have genuine expectations like the need for a dignified life, food, employment, etc. On the other side, you have many fantasies which are peddled by this new media, that is the big media like Facebook, YouTube, etc. They peddle ideas about everyone will become rich. So this is one of the classic ideas of capitalism, saying that if you work hard, you'll become rich. But then people started questioning this. I've been working hard, I've been saving hard, but all my money is being paid in taxes, but yet I'm still not rich. Then where is all this money going? Where is all my hard labor gone? Though we work hard and we are sincere believers in God, we believe in the state, etc. But it seems that there's something wrong. So what is this something wrong? So Duterte seized upon these ideas of the pious Filipino middle class citizens and also the hard-working working class citizens of Philippines to say that what all you're doing is right, but there are some bad elements in the society who are derailing this process. And these are the people who peddle drugs and also who practice violence on the street. And their violent behavior is not only aimed at maiming and killing people or lynching them, but also at raping young children. So this idea of rape of young children is one particular sensitive chord in which most of the Filipinos got unnerved. So therefore, they trusted in Duterte. So what Duterte did was that he took this trust and then also had his parliament to back him. And this started right from the time when he was a mayor in Davao City. And that was a time when Maria Ressa had first interviewed him in the 1980s. During that time itself, he confessed that he had shot a man and then he is pensioned for shooting people down. So this was one particular strand of his strong arm tactics. He said that unlike the Marcos family which had ruled over Philippines, I am a clean person. So this idea of trying to restore order in a disorderly world through strong arm tactics led to large-scale conflicts with the drug traffickers. So this large-scale conflict with the drug traffickers, we do not know whether all of them were drug traffickers or whether some of them were political opponents. Now the question is whether drug traffickers also have human rights. So what is the method of punishing the drug traffickers? Duterte's idea was very simple. Just go after them, shoot them down. So this shooting down led to large number of Filipinos being shot down. The number of shootings increased day on and day in, not only in Manila, Luzon, and other places, Visayas, etc., which are the three most prominent regions of Philippines, but into many regions, and not only into all those places associated with drug peddling, but also in many other regions like universities, colleges, and in also some of the factories, etc. Means it was targeted not only against drug traffickers, but also against other people whom Duterte thought that were his opponents. So the number of killings became too much. So when these number of killings became too much, then what happens is that it resembled the number of casualties in a war. When Filipinos died in such large numbers was only during World War II, during the Japanese occupation. After this, very few Filipinos died in such large numbers. Some of them died after Benigno Aquino was killed, and then we had the rule of the dictator Ferdinand Marcos, and later also during the period of Imelda Marcos. It was only during such periods that many Filipinos died. But those periods were seen by the average Filipino or by the world as an aberration, a period when democracy was not really in existence, though only in name. But now it seems for short periods, after which those governments were toppled down. Now, it seems like the regular system of government itself has become a system in which war is being waged on an everyday basis. Along with this waging of war also is the attempt to stop any voice from questioning this war. This is where Rappler and Maria Ressa came head-on with Duterte's government. Duterte's government has called her all sorts of names, saying that she is out to sabotage Philippines. She's actually bringing out anarchy. Anarchist is one of the favorite words which people who claim to uphold order talk about. Now, it was this particular set of instances that prompted Duterte. But then what happens is that Maria Ressa fearlessly stood for this. And then not only she, but her whole team. And then they started exposing many of the misdeeds of this government, not only with regard to authoritarianism and the purported crackdown on drug trafficking, but also large-scale cases of corruption and other aspects, including the Filipino relations with the neighboring regions in which you had many different terror groups, etc. Some of these which were given a cold shoulder by the Filipino government. So this, in fact, led to Duterte being projected as a dictator. Now, Duterte, the public also became wary. When did they become wary? When some of the innocent people were also killed. So Duterte's idea as a strong man and a clean man now squared off. Now he's seen only as a strong man and not a clean man. When you're seen only as a strong man and not a clean man, you are seen as a bully. And therefore, the anti-democratic credentials of Duterte are out. Now what happens is that therefore his crackdown on the news media. So his crackdown on the news media was not only by arresting some of the people in Rappler and also issuing arrest warrant against Maria Ressa, but also starting an army of fake trolls. So many of these, like the Chinese 10-cent army. China has an army known as the 10-cent army. It is called the 10-cent army because they give 10 cents for making one particular post. Like that, you have many armies. And Philippines is the third largest country in the world in terms of people who are engaged in animation after Japan and South Korea. So you have a large pool of talented Filipinos who are net savvy and also tech savvy. And after the global economic downturn in the last 5 or 6 years, what has happened is that many of them became unemployed. And so their skills were used. And Google also has its unit in Philippines where they filter the websites every day. Like, for example, every minute we have 10,000 new pages being posted, 10,000 or more new pages being posted in English. So some of these pages are not suitable for viewing by children, etc. So you have a big lab in Philippines in which people keep physically watching all these posts and looking for any of the offensive words or photographs, etc. So therefore, the attrition rate in many of these companies will make people quitting, and such people have become part of the army and leading war by getting fake news against Maria Ressa. This therefore emboldened her, and unlike many other journalists, she was one step ahead because of her training, research training, and her up-to-date socialization with the new media. Therefore, she understood not only the tactics of the dictators, but how big media is silent on these dictators in the name of impartiality. And now, before we move on to Dmitry Muratov, we just see that this is a photograph of the dictator Rodrigo Duterte, who met with Vladimir Putin a couple of times. So, while Maria Ressa's fight is primarily in opposition to Duterte's strong arm tactics, we see Duterte's arm being extended to another strong man who is a retired judo player and a former KGB agent, the president of Russia, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. So we go on to Dmitry Muratov, who shared the Nobel Peace Prize with Maria Ressa. Dmitry Andreevich Muratov means this is the Russian system of naming. Dmitry, the son of Andrei, belonging to the Muratov family. He was born in 1961, just 2 years elder to Maria Ressa. He is a Russian journalist and television presenter and editor-in-chief of the Russian newspaper Novaya Gazeta. Novaya Gazeta is not the largest circulated newspaper in Russia. Its circulation is 90,000 copies per day, whereas we have Moscow Gazeta, etc., which circulate in lakhs. We'll come to that later. Muratov co-founded the pro-democracy newspaper Novaya Gazeta. Novaya means new. Gazeta means newspaper. The new newspaper in 1993 with several other journalists. He was the newspaper's editor-in-chief from 1995 to 2017. He quit the post, and then after public pressure, he then assumed the position in 2019, which is a very interesting story. Muratov studied at the Faculty of Philology at Kubitschev. Now it is renamed as Samara State University for 5 years. This was during the Soviet period, where he discovered his interest in journalism and also his flair and felicity with the Russian language and with the words. Like in one of the posts which Muratov says that during the period of the Soviet Union, you could not disagree with the government. And then there was also a law that you cannot quote Lenin more than 20 times in an article, or Stalin. So what people did was that when they had their own fights with some others, they used to bring Lenin into the picture, bring out some quotes from Lenin, paraphrase it, etc., etc. So this his training in the Faculty of Philology and his prowess in the language also made him to read between lines and understand what is what, and also sometimes even when they're very boring or official pictures which make people bored, Muratov takes a satirical view and makes people laugh. This is following the line of the famous book, The Animal Farm, in which George Orwell said that all societies have gaps, even totalitarian societies have gaps. But after the collapse of the Soviet Union, things changed in Russia, or people hoped for a better change. But from 1983 to 85, after graduating from the university, Muratov was part of the Komsomolskaya Gazeta. Komsomol was an organization of the young communists. And then later he served in the Soviet army as a communication equipment security specialist. So he had full knowledge of the workings of the army inside out, and that is the relation with army. And now, Russian Nobel Prize winner Muratov says that the Peace Prize is for my paper and not me. Like Maria Ressa said that the prize is actually for all the journalists around the world. In 1993, that is after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Muratov and 50 other colleagues left Komsomolskaya Pravda. Komsomol was an organization of the young communists, and Pravda means truth. In reality, Muratov laughs when he hears the name Pravda. Pravda was the largest selling newspaper in Russia, which was the official organ of the CPSU, that is the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. So Pravda, people were intimated to believe it as truth. Muratov and others read it differently and says that there is no truth in Pravda. Only the word Pravda is the truth. And so this is a satirical way of looking at it. Muratov stepped down After he and his colleagues joined, Muratov stepped down from the newspaper in 2017. Why did he step down? Because of the whole difficult process of running the newspaper. That is, we had Russia going through a crisis. We had Boris Yeltsin coming up. Then after Boris Yeltsin, that is after the collapse of the Soviet Union and formation of the CIS, that is the Commonwealth of Independent States, we had a new realignment. Then we had the strongman Vladimir Putin coming. Putin's main lament was that the collapse of the Soviet Union was one of the greatest geopolitical disasters of the 20th century. Now, Muratov understood the mood of the people. That is, the mood of the people prior to 1989 and then later in 1990 after the collapse of the Soviet Union vastly changed. Like Philippines, which is presently in a state of disorder. So the idea was the need for a strong man. Muratov understood this differently. Muratov understood that whenever Russia was in crisis, like the Mongol invasion in the medieval period, you had a strong man coming in. Who were the strong men? These were the kings of the Grand Duchy of Muscovy. So similarly, you had the aggression with the Germans. And then again, you had a strong man. That is, you had strong czars like Peter the Great and Ivan the Terrible. And then later, you also had Catherine the Tsarina. Then after the collapse of the czars, then again Russia was tottering. And then you had strong man Lenin. So the Russians, Muratov says, are accustomed to the idea of a strong man. And Putin tries to cast himself as a strong man. And then therefore you have little men who come in the way of the big men. And this was what Muratov was supposed to be, a little man who was trying to upset the apple cart. Now, after being editor-in-chief for 20 years, Muratov, as I told you, resigned in 2017. He resigned in 2017 because of many reasons, including the reason that many of his colleagues were killed. Then it was only because two of the important shareholders in the newspaper, one is Alexander Lebedev and the other one is Mikhail Gorbachev, the earlier Nobel laureate and also the former president of the Soviet Union. Both of them actually pressurized Muratov not to resign. And then the staff also unanimously voted for his return. Then this was Muratov's second innings in the newspaper. And during this period, what happens is that Muratov emerges stronger, and he, as I told you, credits the Nobel Peace Prize to his colleagues. During Muratov's time at the Novaya Gazeta, 6 British journalists have been killed. So Muratov says, this Nobel Prize is not for me, it's not mine. I am not the right beneficiary. There are real ones. It's just that the Nobel Peace Prize isn't awarded posthumously. It's awarded to living people. Obviously, they decided to award it to someone living, having in mind Yuri Shekochikin, Igor Dominkov, Anna Politkovskaya, Anastasia Bogurova, Stanislav Markelov, and Natalia Estemirova. So some of these famous people, like most of us who are watching television, particularly CNN, BBC, are now bombarded with images of Lukashenko in Belarus and also Alexander Navalny, Russian dissident, who is the one person who is going to stand for election against Putin and then who was arrested, had gone to Germany. The only newspaper which actually took on the Putin regime and then gave a clear account day by day happening of all these events was the Novaya Gazeta. And similarly, before that, one of the most important correspondents, Anna Politkovskaya, was killed in 2006. Why was she killed? It's very interesting. She was murdered outside her apartment because this was the period we had the first Chechen war in 1996, after which Chechnya was on the boil. We have many regions in the North Caucasus like Chechnya, Ingushetia, and Dagestan, which are on the boil. That is because of certain militant activities there. After the first Chechen war, in the Russian Duma or the parliament, there were discussions on the nature of the war, and there was a portrayal of Chechnya, a one-sided portrayal. So what Anna Politkovskaya argued is that this one-sided portrayal was actually dangerous for Russia because it was actually bringing out fascism. How? Because the second Chechen war, which was going to come, was actually a war which needed consent from the people. So how do you manufacture consent? So linguistic consent was created in the Russian parliament, saying that it is a war against terror. So you present a one-sided idea of a war, and now order was brought in Chechnya. And how did order come about in Chechnya? Because now you have replaced a strong man who was an opponent by co-opting the strong man. Now Ramzan Kadyrov, the president of Chechnya, whose father was a rebel, Ahmad Kadyrov, and later became a supporter of Putin, has come to rule over the state of affairs. This was what Anna Politkovskaya had warned about, that how linguistic consent is generated in the Duma using a one-sided idea of only the Chechens as insurgents. Whereas we also have the Russians prodding, that is Russian army. And the civil society in both these regions are totally absent from any discourse. Later, we also have Yuri Shekochikin, who was known far beyond Russian borders, that is in many parts of Western Europe. And Yuri Shekochikin, like many other famous Russian dissidents, died from mysterious poisoning. This is actually a very costly poison, which is very difficult to treat, unlike the traditional poisons. So Yuri Shekochikin was poisoned. He was, unfortunately, unlike others, though he was a member of parliament who was having special security and privileges, he was a member of the state Duma. Duma is the Russian parliament, a member of the anti-corruption committee. He was investigating complicated corruption cases. That is, Russia has become suddenly rich after the 1990s in many areas. One of them is what we call the hydrocarbon sector and the natural gas sector. Putin and the Belarusian dictator constantly threatened the West that they will turn off the gas supply, because the winter in the West, that is in Western Europe, depends on Russian and the Central Europe, the Eastern European gas for heating their homes. And suddenly these countries became rich, and then you had new oligarchs, and these oligarchs were supported by the state, and there were a lot of payoffs, and a new idea of making money came to Russia, so much so that Moscow is the only city in the world which has the largest number of billionaires. You have more than 50 billionaires in one city, and that is Moscow. And this was one of the target of Yuri Shekochikin, who tried to investigate how some people suddenly became billionaires with state backing and also their deeds which were not legal. And he, along with Natalia Estemirova, both of them were actually working on this idea. Estemirova, while Yuri Shekochikin was poisoned, Estemirova was shot. She actually was a prominent critic of the younger Kadyrov, that is Ramzan Kadyrov, in which he talks of one episode in which there was a football match in which the football team patronized Ramzan Kadyrov, the ruler of Chechnya, that is the president of Chechnya, lost the match. So when the match was lost, some of the players who did not play well, according to Ramzan Kadyrov, were punished by shooting them with a machine gun. So though some did not die. So, and then there were also the anti-gay purges in Chechnya in 2017. Then we also have other important people who died, who were part of Novaya Gazeta. One of them was a human rights lawyer, that is Markelov. Markelov was killed. Stanislav Markelov was killed, and he was investigating the Russian military abuses in Chechnya. And these abuses, he said that, were not one-sided. That is, you have many of these Chechen thugs who are patronized by both the Chechen state and also by the Russian state. And so both of them worked in tandem to terrorize the common people. So what happens is that they push the common people to the wall, and then you have the rise of opinion which is two-sided. The other two people who were also killed were Igor Domnikov and Anastasia Baburova. So both of them actually also were part of the shootings. That is, in Russia, we have highly trained people to shoot many of these journalists down. And then we also have another set of people who are actually motivated by some sort of ethno-nationalist pride, saying that the journalists are a curse on Russia because of their giving voice to many different groups. Some of these groups are like the group Femen and also like the group Pussy Riot. Pussy Riot is a group which is actually a music group by women, and it was put in jail. Same is the case with Femen, which is a group which is prevalent not only in Russia but also in many parts of Eastern Europe, and they go and strip to the chest to show that it is a form of protest, that is, the body has become a site of protest. Now, so when these 6 people are killed, what happens is that the Russian mind, unlike other regions, Russia was under Soviet terror and also under tyranny. So the Russians always know to read between the lines. So when the Russians know to read between the lines, what happens is that they actually have been received through various filters, cultural filters, and then one of the important ways of dealing with Russian is saying that he's an anti-national person, but he's a foreign agent. The 1970s and 80s, during the height of the Cold War, anyone who was pro-Western was called a foreign agent. So Putin says, like Duterte threatened Maria Ressa, and even after she won the Nobel Prize, officially he congratulated her, but later on issued statements and tweets saying that this is not all right. Similarly, the Kremlin congratulated Muratov, but then Putin says that if he means Muratov, covers himself with the Nobel Prize like a shield to violate Russian laws, he does so consciously, Putin said at a public event in Moscow. If he doesn't break Russian law and there is no reason to declare him a foreign agent, then that won't happen. Means if he does not obey the Russian law means the law read according to Putin's wishes, he would be arrested and then not allowed to live the life of a Nobel laureate, means a person who can travel freely and express his opinion. Dmitry Muratov responded by saying, I am not Pasternak, referring to the 1958 Nobel laureate of literature, Boris Pasternak, who gave the famous slogan for which he was awarded the Nobel Prize, man is born to live, not to prepare for life. Because Pasternak was born in 1890, his father was a famous painter and his mother was a pianist. He saw that people were ready to die for the Tsar and the church. And later the revolution came, they were ready to die for the revolution. And then later on for the newfound state, Soviet Union. He said people are preparing all their lives, only preparing and preparing. Man is born to live, not to prepare for life. And so Pasternak, although he was given the Nobel Prize for Literature, was not allowed to receive the prize. So Muratov says that I am not Pasternak, means I won't be quiet or I won't be intimidated. So with this short presentation, we now, is there some more time or? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yeah. So now what happens is that both these Nobel laureates have not only talked about the freedom of the press, they are actually talking of certain things that no one is sacred or above the law. So who are the people who are not sacred or above the law? It is Muratov is very clear on this issue, saying that fine, the Nobel Peace Prize is also full of politics. He does agree. And we also have 2 instances of Nobel laureates. One is Aung San Suu Kyi, who won the Nobel Peace Prize and who was a darling for the West and also for everyone in the world. But suddenly after the junta has taken over power in Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi is now accused of collaborating with some of the authoritarian leaders and also with the ethnic armies. And even before this, the same is now in a much more clearer case. With yeah.
Are you sharing the screen right now?
No, right now I'm not sharing the screen.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Yeah, I'll end in 4 or 5 minutes and then we can have a question and answer session. The other Nobel Peace Prize winner who is in controversy is a 2009 winner, Abiy Ali, the president of Ethiopia, who says that he will hunt the Tigray people, that is the people of the Tigray region, and bury them, that is the Tigray militants. But then what happens is that there is another civil war going on in Ethiopia between the northern regions and the other ethnic groups. So therefore, both these Nobel laureates, Maria Ressa and Muratov, have now pointed out that the categories of the old, that is the voices of protest of the earlier period, are fine. But then there are newer means, that is wars earlier were fought by using weapons. But now wars are also fought using the mouse or many of these computer websites. And therefore what happens is that this digital arena or the cyberspace has become a new battlefield. And this battlefield, where is this battlefield? Cyberspace cannot be pinned down to the battleground. Cyberspace is everywhere. It is there in your bedroom, it is there in your drawing room, it is there in your living room, it is there in the public spaces, new media is there on your telephones. So therefore, to silence cyberspace, and then if you access any of these ideas, what will happen is that you will be dubbed a foreign agent in Russia, or you will be dubbed someone else in the Philippines. And so to stand up to this and not be intimidated by threats, like many other newspapers we have seen, for example, in many of these regions, they have all become part of the government, received fat salaries and honorably exited. So we have many of the websites who are actually closed down. So the war on the new media is actually a new war which is happening. China's surveillance state, the banning of what we call many of the websites, and WeChat, which has become the mother of all websites in China, so much so that a BBC correspondent has said that it just takes 8 minutes to track down anyone in China. And so now you have the convergence of new media, which has become more totalitarian. Like George Orwell said that even totalitarian states have gaps, but the new media controlled states have very less gaps. So in honor of the journalism, both old style and new style journalism, the Nobel laureates have inspired us to understand the world and also shown us how to analyze the world and make the world a better place by contributing our own voices and act with conscience, just even if it is in a small way with the click of a mouse. With this, I end my talk, and if there are any doubts, clarifications, or comments, I would be happy to engage.
Thank you, sir. That was a wonderful talk. Now let us address the questions asked by the attendees.
Okay, so there are some questions on the chat box by Pratyaksh Mohan. He says, "Sir, history shows that to govern and hold a vast country like Russia, you have to rule by the iron hand, otherwise it will fall apart." Second is, so right to speech is important, but how will you use it if you do not have a country like people in Syria? So these are two questions. So Russia, actually what happens is that one has to go back to the history of Russia and to understand Russia. That is this history of Russia. In Central Asia, we have two important regions which are affected by the Mongols. Both of them are on the other two sides of the Great Wall. One is China and the other is Russia. In the 13th century, when the Mongols came and built the strongest or the largest land empire in the world, which is 22% of the globe, what happens is that this Mongol interregnum, that is from the borders of Korea till the borders of Hungary, it became the largest empire. It unsettled many other empires and became a nomadic. China fell under the Mongols. And so therefore in China, what happens is that you have this extreme nationalism against the northern barbarians. So any outsider is a barbarian, particularly the northerners are the Mongols. So same is the case with Russia. Russia was ruled by Yaroslav the Wise. And then what happens with the Mongols is that no one could actually defeat Russia because of the cold. Napoleon failed because Napoleon could not enter Russia because of the ice. Hitler failed, and that is why we had the famous Battle of Stalingrad and Leningrad, in which Hitler also failed. And the victorious Red Army, the brave soldiers of the Red Army defeated Hitler. But then what happened with the Mongols was that the Mongols are not afraid of cold. They used to play in the cold. The freezing waters were used as places for skating by the Mongols, that is, the sleds drawn by the horses. And therefore, this idea of Russia, which has to be ruled by a dictator, was an idea which became part of the Russian political thought since the time of the Tsar. And it was actually legitimized by the Russian church. But history shows it is otherwise. Most regions of Russia, including Siberia, etc., which were taken later, were actually regions which do not need a strong hand to rule. So this idea of Russia needing a strong hand to rule is actually not needed, because we have very few revolts or rebellions in Russia. And most of the rebellions which are taking place in the Caucasus are for a particularly different reason. The reason is that the historical memories. After Stalin came to power in the 1930s, most of the people in the Caucasus were taken and deported to Siberia, and only then later they came back, like the people in Kalmykia, which is the only Buddhist political entity in Europe, and then you have Ingushetia, Kabarno, Bulgaria, etc. So therefore, the idea of Russia needing a strongman is actually a myth which is peddled by the Russian state and also by the others. Hope people like Navalny and others take it to its logical end. The second question you asked about people without a country. There are many people without a country, like, for example, the Tibetans. So there was a joint organization for the liberation of Inner Mongolia, East Turkestan, and Tibet. But then the Tibetans stopped being part of this because of the whole idea of violence. Because if you start violence against China, China will take this and respond with greater violence. So there are a large number of people. This is, as the earlier Nobel laureate in 1989, the Dalai Lama said that this century is the century of refugees. So we have many people who do not have a country. And so therefore, cyberspace has become one of the new arenas of battleground. Another question is that the Peace Prize isn't awarded posthumously. Can you tell the idea behind it? Because you have mentioned the examples of Aung San Suu Kyi, the Ethiopian president, wasn't a little early to. So if you say Peace Prize is not awarded posthumously because of the policies which were instituted, because then it would lead to a lot of controversies, etc., like demand for the war. This was part of the original will of Alfred Nobel. And then wasn't it too early to give a Peace Prize? Yes, it was also too early to give a Peace Prize to people like Barack Obama, who after getting the Peace Prize started the crisis in Syria, the war on terror in Syria, and also used extensive chemical bombing, and then led to the crisis in, escalated the crisis in Afghanistan. Similarly, we also have some other problems with Nobel laureates like the earlier American Nobel Peace Prize winner, who said that there is no morality in international relations. So therefore, these are some problems. And is it anywhere related to setting an example to the world where people are still alive? Yes, it is in one way, but the original will says that it is only people who are living will be given. That is according to the ideas of the wishes of the Nobel laureates. But as both of these have said that this prize does not belong to me, but belongs to the journalists around the world, to the fraternity. So we see that except people like Henry Kissinger, whom I had mentioned, that said that there is no morality in international relations, and yet he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize later. Now we have people like many others who said that the Nobel Prize is a recognition of the rights that I am representing, or the people whom I am representing. Like, for example, the Dalai Lama says that this Nobel Peace Prize is a recognition of the 6 million Tibetans who have actually supported me. I am just their symbol. Or many others who have the recipients of the Nobel Prize. But you're right, it is too early to give prize to some people like Ali, but Aung San Suu Kyi, we are still not sure. Yeah. And I'm very thankful to many of you who are given such good messages appreciating the talk. Thank you so much. Any other questions, clarifications, or doubts?
So we have one more question in the chat box. Do
Yeah.
justice and peace go hand in hand? That is, does peace ensure justice or justice ensure peace?
Does peace ensure justice or justice ensure peace? So do we have a war to end all wars is the question. So many wars are waged with the idea that we need a war to end all wars. So the whole idea of trying to solve, so what happens after a war? After a war, again, the people, both parties sit at the negotiating table and then try to talk about it. So why don't they talk before the war itself? The reason is that when they go to a war, then both parties have a belief that we'll win or will emerge stronger on the negotiating table by a show of strength. So this leads to enormous loss of lives and then many other losses. So to ensure justice, what happens that peace has to go hand in hand. This is one important way of articulating a future. Rather than to ensure peace, we need war. So this is exactly what these two people have been talking. Yes, we need justice, but we need justice not through violence. That is, the ends do not justify the means. This is the whole idea of what these two people, both Maria Ressa and Dmitry Muratov, have been talking about. Yes.
Sir, I have one more question.
Yeah, please.
So, like even in India, if you see, we got the new IT rules and all. Like even when you were mentioning that there is a new kind of fight now, which is the new digital media fight, where the governments are trying to. Why do you think is the governments around the world more trying to control the narrative? Like, is it like something which they're scared that people would know the truth, or is it that the fake news will take over, or like why is that so much thinking of that people are going to know this and that they should know only this is happening? Like, why does
See,
that?
this is where we have to understand Maria Ressa. People, while talking about Maria Ressa, try to paint both Duterte and Maria Ressa both as polar opposites when you understand digital rights. So the whole digital arena, like earlier we had the orality and then the print media. Now we have a hypertext media, which is not coming from top to bottom, where people who create news are not only consumers, but as the earlier writer Alvin Toffler pointed out, we are also prosumers. While consuming news, we are also making news. So this is very different from the earlier newspapers. After reading a newspaper, you may get affected. But then what happens is that you don't spill your affect on the streets, etc. You don't organize. But through these microblogging sites, through Facebook, WhatsApp and groups, you also consume news and produce news. So therefore, what happens is that reasonable restrictions have to be there. Reasonable restrictions like, for example, child pornography, violence, gambling, etc., and also provocation to rioting, etc. So these are what they call is that on one side you say it both. Therefore, the idea of having a digital free world is also coming with a responsibility. So this responsibility cannot be understood in abstraction. It has to be understood in the way how we actually these media companies are operating. So how are these media companies operating? These media companies like Google, Facebook, etc. are operating using advanced algorithms. So now the whole world is ruled by algorithms. So it is death by big data. So big data actually dictates what you do, and the power of artificial intelligence tracks on your movement. So whenever you go to your Google search box, you have 1001 suggestions. So what happens is that, as Maria Ressa had said, it is micro-blogging and the way to mold our behavior. So decision sciences has gone to a new threshold. So therefore, we need new laws which have to be ethical and humane at the same time. But at the same time, we also should not have have responsibility and not dispense with ideas of egalitarianism and justice. Yeah, means you have to take a nuanced approach. Someone has raised a hand. Yeah, is balance in power necessary for there to be a balance in power? Means I'm not sure. What do you mean balance in power? Means we need checks. That is, power should not flow only from one source. just like opinions do not flow from one source only. So we have a multiplicity of views. It is this multiplicity of views which is actually more enabling to the society, rather than having only a top-down discourse in which you have a dictatorial discourse. And then, but in reality, people say that no, it's not dictatorial discourse, it is democratic because it is on Facebook, there are 10 people. And who are these 10 people? Half of them may be paid like the 10-cent army. Actually, so balance in power means you have multiple views, whether you like them or not. But there is a way of understanding. That is where these nuanced ideas and also some method of articulation comes in. Yes, there's a way to disagree with people. Yeah. Any other doubts, clarifications, or comments?
Sir, what is the contribution of our constitution to make India a peaceful country?
The main contribution of our constitution to make India a peaceful country is the idea of non-aggression, and that India will not actually be embroiled in wars, or it will not be an expansionist state. So it nurtures upon the democratic ideals. That is, any decision which is taken will have a democratic consensus. It cannot be like any dictator declaring war or generating consensus so that we can go. So if you want to declare war, you have to take it to the parliament. Then face the election.
Sir, your voice was breaking.
Yeah. Now is it audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Please tell me. So, any other doubt, clarification, or comments?
Sir, we've seen like in India, like the judiciary being really strong sometimes when it comes to expressing opinions or something. Isn't it the same in like Philippines or Russia? Isn't like I've never seen like some judiciary. I mean, yeah, at least in the media which we follow, like judiciary standing up and making
No,
sure
like
that people.
we have the thing that Agamben, who calls certain periods as a state of exception. In India, only for a very short period during the emergency, etc. Otherwise, our judiciary had a long run, and most of the democratic institutions were actually free. Though some of them, there are some complaints, but then these can be debated also in the public domain. Now, what happens with both Russia and the Philippines is that we have only few spells of democracy. Then you have military rule. Then in Philippines, then in Russia, you have authoritarian rule through the political process. Like the Russian constitution says that a person can run for president only twice. Putin has managed to take this, and then he has managed to bring his proteges into power, etc. So most of the court proceedings are stalled in Russia. Then you also have many high-profile people being imprisoned. One of them is Boris Kagarlitsky, who is one of the prominent critics of the New Left review. Kagarlitsky was imprisoned in the Soviet Union, and then again during the time of Yeltsin, and again during the time of Putin. So Kagarlitsky's main idea is that democratic institutions have not evolved, and the left in Russia and the left in the West is also to blame. So he takes an unbiased view, an unscatching attack. Catching attack. Yeah. So Russia, that is the whole problem. Yes. Sure. Yes, please. Any other topics to discuss?
So I hope all the questions are over.
Yeah.
So we shall move on to the vote of thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, sure.
Thanks a lot for addressing the questions, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you all for being patient and hearing me. Thank you so much. Yeah.
So on behalf of the Junior Science Club and the Entropy Club, I would like to extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the Honorable Speaker, Dr. N.N. Rajesh, who shared his virtual presence and took out valuable time from his busy schedule to share his knowledge with us. I also wish to express my gratitude to the Director of College of Integrated Studies, Professor B.V. Sharma, Associate Director, Professor Salman Abdul Mois, Dean of School of Life Sciences, Professor Siddhavatam Dayananda, HOD of the Biochemistry Department, Professor Krishnaveni Mishra, for providing us the opportunity and support to organize this talk. I'm very grateful to all the faculty coordinators of JSC and Entropy Club, Dr. S. Ilangovan, Dr. Archana Morie, Professor Muralidharan, Dr. Srinath, Professor Sharmista, and Dr. Manjari Kiran for their constant presence, guidance, and valuable encouragement. At last, I extend my big thanks to our CIS, SLS office members, all the senior and fellow student coordinators of JSC and Entropy Club, and our dear audience for participating with such enthusiasm and patience. Thank you all for making this event successful with your contribution.
Thank you.